Prompt Management 101 with the subtitle Boring but Highly Important Concepts about how to manage prompts at scale without going crazy. So this video is going to be for you if you work with prompts professionally within your code base and want to get a better understanding about how to properly do so that you can over time improve your large language model applications. So in this video, I'm going to share all of the different methods and strategies that you can use to manage your prompts. I'm going to cover everything that we've seen from the companies that we work with datalumina. And now, for those of you that are new here, my name is Ebbelaar. I'm the founder of datalumina, which is a data and AI development company. So we essentially help companies to get started with data and AI, either assisting their engineering teams or completely done for you projects. And next to that, I also share all of my lessons here on YouTube. So if that's your thing, make sure to subscribe as well. But now let's get into what we are going to cover within this video. So we're going to start with a high-level introduction about prompt management. What is it? Why is it important? We'll cover some common mistakes. We cover the methods, and then we also highlight our approach that we use at datalumina to serve all of the different clients and the projects that we're currently working on. And then we'll conclude with some best practices. In this video, we're not going to cover prompt engineering. We're not going to cover the latest model updates or best practices or frameworks to improve your applications. No, we're really going to talk about prompt management, which is a systematic approach to storing, versioning, and retrieving prompts in your LLM applications. And some key aspects of prompt management include version control, potentially decoupling your prompts from your code, monitoring and logging, optimizing prompts, and also integrating prompts. All important concepts that let you systematically manage and improve your LLM application that is using prompts over time. Why is this important? Why am I going to create an entire presentation on this concept, and why should you watch this? Well, when it comes to building LLM apps, your prompts are often more important than your code. Let me highlight this with the following example, and also given the assumption here that you don't break your code. On the left here, we have a very messy function with an OK prompt where there are some variables in there and we can give some context to the model, some guidelines, maximum words, maximum lengths, etc. But very messy code, something that you do not want in your code base. On the other hand, example 2, we have a very clean function, but a bad prompt. It's just write about product name. And this simple example just goes to show that whenever you're building applications, if it runs, if you manage to get it to work, you can refactor everything that you want, but your end user or the client is not going to notice anything about essentially how your code base is structured. You just, of course, want to follow best practices for yourself or the team that you're working with. But to be fair, the client or your end user is not going to notice it. Whereas a slight, ever so slight change within your prompts, which could be as simple as changing one word, can have great effects on the outputs and outcomes and thus utility of your LLM application. And that's why prompt management is really important. So now let's first cover some common prompt management mistakes. And at least I can say for myself, I've made all of these mistakes in the beginning. So first common mistake, prompts scattered across your project. So imagine this, you're building an application and you have some functions here. You have an OpenAI, let's say you have an OpenAI API call somewhere in a function within a file. And in there is a prompt. And then in another file, you have another prompt. And then somewhere else, for a different use case based on some if-else logic, you have another prompt over there. Everything is scattered. So now when you come in or a team member comes in and you want to change something, you really have to dig. So where is that prompt and what is it affecting? Then also limited version control. So if you store all of your prompts within your code base, so within, let's say, your Python files, or as in separate TXT files for that matter, you have limited version control. You can manage that and keep track of that with Git, which for a lot of use cases might be enough. I will get into that. But for some use cases, especially if your applications gets more serious, more users, or the team get larger, you might want to have an alternative method to managing and versioning your prompts other than just plain Git. Because while you can keep track of everything, you cannot very easily roll back that change, because you could go through the commit messages, right, and see, okay, where did we exactly change that prompt? But it's not really where with one click of a button you have version 1 and version 2 of your prompt, and if it doesn't work, you go back to version 1. Also, lack of standardization. So not having a clear, like, thought out structure or standardized way that you manage prompts within your code base and within your projects can also, again, lead to these inconsistencies, harder for team members and also yourself to come back later and then adjust them and update them. Number 4, no evaluation framework. So adjusting prompts based on just like gut feel when you are looking typically at solo, like isolated examples. So you're trying to solve a problem. So one answer should be slightly different, for example, than you expected. You change the prompt, let's say in the playground. Oh, it works on this isolated example. Let's push that to production without knowing what the effects of that change are going to be really at the global level of your code base. And then prompt redundancy. So having a lot of very similar prompts scattered across your code base, each with, for example, different nuances or different cases where it's going to be hard to keep track of that. So let's say you have 2 very similar prompts and you find out that on, like, let's say prompt A, you tweak some things because you ran into an issue and you change that, push it to production, and then forgetting that you also actually had prompt B, which was very similar, but just had, let's say, some different conditional logic or something in there, that there is no then link to that. So prompt redundancy. And then finally, common mistake number 6 is no metadata. So just a prompt in a TXT file or an F string or just in line within your API call without any context about who wrote this, what version is this on, what's the utility, what model should we be using this, no metadata. So these are some common mistakes that I see a lot of new AI engineers make. And like I've said, I've made all these mistakes as well. And you should also consider here that depending on where you are at in your like learning journey or development journey, the more serious your project gets, the more important it becomes to make sure you don't make these mistakes. So if you're just starting out working on a, let's say, a portfolio project, this doesn't really matter as much. When you start to put things into an application that people are actually using, or you start to work with a team, this becomes more and more important and a must in order to make sure that things don't get out of control, because it will happen otherwise. So now let's cover some of the methods that you can use for prompt management. And we're going to cover 5 methods that we've seen, that we've encountered. And you could even view these 5 as kind of like a leveling system as well, where level 1, the inline prompts, which we'll cover in a bit, is like the easiest, most straightforward one where everyone starts. And as you progress, it gets more complicated to do so, let's say, but you also get additional benefits. But each of these methods here has some trade-offs, which we will also get into. Each have their own pros and cons. So high level, we have separate slides for all of these methods, which we will now get into. So you can determine which level you are at right now and also decide what makes the most sense for you, because I don't recommend level 5 custom database storage for everyone. It really depends on the project. So high level, we have inline prompts, centralized storage, structured centralized storage, external prompt management tools, and then finally custom database storage. So now let's get into the first one, inline prompts. So this is where everyone starts, right? Embedding prompts directly in the code base, typically within the API calls or function parameters. So here you can see an example, generate project description. You have the prompt in here and then you make the API call. So pros, simple and quick to implement. Direct context availability within the code. So a developer can come in here and look at this generate project description function and can instantly see, okay, this is the prompt that we're dealing with. So this is what we're sending to the model. But then some cons. It's hard to maintain and update at scale. It lacks centralized management, version control, and metadata. So when you look at this prompt as is, it's very straightforward, right? But in production environments, especially when your application gets more complex, prompts are often not as simple as this quick like one-liner. So usually they can get pretty, at least like a couple sentences or paragraphs to give more context. on style, formatting, chain of thought, few shot examples. So this can get big quite quickly, also potentially with more variables. And at that point, you most likely want to move it to a place somewhere else where in the function, you can just focus on like the function logic and then decouple that in some way. So inline prompts, this is where everyone starts. It has some pros and cons, but it's typically not what you want to do. So if you are at this level over here, one easy upgrade fix that you can implement is switching to centralized storage, where you store prompts in a dedicated folder or file within the code base, improving the organization, but without enforcing a specific structure. So what you could do, for example, within your project, just create a folder prompts and put it in there. And you can even create subfolders in here, for example, different let's say pipelines, workflows, or categories, but having that centralized place. So whenever you know, okay, we have to update a prompt, you know where to go and you have that overview of everything that is in there. So some of the pros here: improved organization compared to inline prompts, easier to find and update as well. And then we also, of course, have some cons. There is still no really enforced structure, which can lead to inconsistency. So we have some files in here, but it doesn't say how we should structure these files. Again, limited version capabilities, lack of metadata. It's a slight change from having them really inline towards a centralized place where we manage them, but there are still some issues with this approach. All right, and then let's get to level 3, which is structured centralized storage, which is where you organize your prompts in a central location, but now also with a predefined structure or template. And for this, you could, for example, use f-strings, or you could use LangChain or Llama index with, for example, a prompt template that you see over here. Or you could use Jinja as a templating engine, which is actually what we're using. And I'm going to share in the next section why we use Jinja and why we prefer it over using something like LangChain or using f-strings with additional benefits. Or you could use something like Prompty, which is a framework by Microsoft. You can see it over here in the left corner. It's pretty small, but definitely look into Prompty. Look into Prompty.ai and see if you like it, if it resonates with you. But the main idea here is with level 3 is that we have a centralized place, but also a predefined structure. Whereas with level 2, we just have one place, right? But it can be, you could put anything in those files. Maybe it's TXT, maybe it's Python files, whatever. And here we really get clear on that. And probably for 80% of you watching, this is all you need: a proper structured centralized storage system to manage your prompts. And like I said, the next section, our approach, I will share some code examples that you can see on the left over here with Jinja and our prompt manager that you can copy if you like it. So make sure to stay around for that. But now quickly, pros and cons. Enhances consistency and maintainability, allows for dynamic prompt generation because we have these templating files and systems. Facilitates easier collaboration among the team members because it's really clear, right? This is where we place the prompts in this structure. And these structures and templates can also be extended to include metadata because we have that structure. And then some cons: it requires initial setup and agreement on template and structure. So yeah, you have to get clear on, okay, what is it that we're using? Requires learning a templating language or system, which, to be honest, is very easy, but it takes some more work than just, okay, dump the prompts in here or whatever inline. And then we have versioning is still limited to just Git, which might be all you need. But like I've said, sometimes you need a little bit more. And that is where we get into level 4. And that is external prompt management tools. So you can also manage your prompts utilizing a third-party application such as Langsmith or Langfuse to manage your prompts. And here we really decouple our prompts from our code base. So we really take it out of that, put it into a separate storage location, and then within our code, we query essentially the prompts whenever we need them. And with this, we essentially turn it into a content management system that stores our prompts. The pros of this, we can get into advanced features like versioning, rollbacks, metadata, and analytics, also depending on the platform that you're using. So I know that both Langsmith and Langfuse offer those types of capabilities, where Langfuse is fully open source, Langsmith is from LangChain and it's closed source, easier to get started. Langfuse also has a cloud version, by the way, but you can also fully self-host it, and that is what we're doing. And it also provides a user-friendly interface for non-technical team members. So you can just look at the prompts over here. So this is the prompt for the event planner. You can see we have a version, we have some variables that we have to put in. We even have a model config. And then within our code is just langfuse prompt is langfuse.get prompt, and we get that event planner. But it's not within our code base. So, but like I've said, even non-technical stakeholders can come in here, and maybe, for example, you're working with a copywriter or something like that. They can come in here, or you're working with a client. The cons introduces extra overhead to manage this service because it's somewhere else. And it also introduces this dependency on this third-party service, which could also kind of like result in a vendor lock-in of some sorts, where if you build your entire code base around having your prompts in that system, you are likely going to stick with that. And given how quickly everything is changing within the AI landscape, this can sometimes be a drawback as well. And this can bottleneck local development because you have this external dependency. Sometimes if you quickly want to test things and you don't want to put a new prompt into the system, it can get messy with that. And this just may be overkill for smaller projects. So here we're definitely talking about more serious applications that are most likely already running in production, and users are using this system. That is really when you should consider upgrading to an external prompt management if you feel the need to. Like I've said, for some projects, smaller projects, this might be all you need, but this is where it gets a little bit more serious. And then finally, next to using an external prompt management tool that's already pre-built, you can also just build a custom one, build your own. Because to be honest, it's not that challenging. You could just create a database where you store your prompts and have metadata versioning in there, everything tailored to your specific needs. You could just, for example, look at all of the variables and data that, for example, tools like Langsmith or Langfuse are using, and you just create a simple, let's say, PostgreSQL database, put it in there, and then make your own API function to query those prompts. So this is also something that you can do. And here you can also potentially have easier integrations within other applications within, let's say, your company or your ecosystem or whatever you're using. It's more flexible. You can do anything here. So it can be tailored specifically to your project needs, allow for dynamic retrieval and complex querying, easier integration, like I've said, but requires database management, setup and management, complex to implement and maintain, also can bottleneck local development, and again, maybe overkill for smaller projects. So those are the 5 prompt management methods that we have identified. So here, finally, again, an overview and what you can do for you can consider where you are at right now. And then whenever you feel like you're running into issues with your current approach when it comes to managing your prompts, you could look into, okay, what does the next step look like and improve from there. But now let's cover our approach that we use at datalumina. And this is based on around Jinja as a templating engine. So Jinja is a powerful Python-based template engine ideal for managing prompts, we found, offering flexibility and versatility. And here again, I want to stress that for most projects, especially when working with small teams, a CMS or custom database setup might be overkill. So in these cases, we prefer working with Jinja and a predefined folder structure. So I would say for most of the projects right now, this is our approach. We are with 1 or 2 projects right now considering to set up a custom database because it gets more serious and we want to have even greater control over our prompts. But let's cover why we use Jinja, some of the benefits, and then I'm going to share some code examples with you and show you how this actually comes together within a project. So why we use it? Well, centralized within the project. So we can just create a dedicated folder. We have it in the project. Every developer can come in there and instances, okay, these are the prompts. Jinja offers a unique file extension. And while this might sound very simple, it's a subtle nuance where what a lot of AI engineers do is either you use f-strings, so you have Python files with f-strings in there, or use, for example, LangChain or Llama index, and then also Python-based files with these prompt templates. But now what you get, if you start to work on an application, you have some files, Python files that have the prompts, and they probably have very similar names to, let's say, product description prompt or product description.py. But then you also have a product description.py, which is the actual function to call it. And this can get messy. So it's all Python files. With this, we found subtle nuance. We just know, okay, the G2 files, the Jinja files, that's where our prompts live, and we can easily open those up. We can also easily add metadata to these files using front matter. We can enforce input validation, which is something that is a little bit trickier to do with f-strings. We can also use advanced logic, which is really big. I will give some examples, but we can use control structures like if statements, loop filters, macros, and even prompt inheritance, which is going to reduce the redundancy and, if done well, can optimize your token usage within prompts. And it's also highly flexible. So when you are, for example, using an external prompt management tool, there are some design choices in there. With this, you can basically do everything and tailor it specifically to your needs. So now let's look at an example. So we created a simple prompt manager class acting as the interface to render prompts from our template folder. So this is the high-level overview of everything that we're dealing with, but I'm going to switch right now to the code editor. Let's see, we got everything going on over here. So here, first of all, we have the prompt manager class. And if you want to copy this, this is the shot for you to do so. So you can take that. And then, for example, in this example project over here, we have the app folder, and there we have a prompts folder, and in there we have the templates. So the prompt manager file that you're looking at right now also lives here, but then we also have the templates, and you can see that we can specify that template directory so that when we use the prompt manager class, it can just look in here and we can load the files. Very simple, the prompt manager, it does an initialization, but we use static methods and a class method, so we don't have to initialize. We can just directly call the get prompt and get our prompts, and we also can get the template info from it. So it's two simple functions that we can use. So now let's have a look at how that works. Let's come over here in the playground, come over here to the pipeline. So in the prompts, let me zoom in a little bit for you so you can see what's going on. And let's start this up. You can see over here in the prompts, we have this ticket analysis.jinja file. And what we can now do within our project, we can say prompt manager.getPrompt. We put in the name of the file, so that's ticket analysis. And we can also put in various variables in here. So this ticket analysis prompt requires the pipeline, which is a variable, which is a string, and then also the ticket, which is a dictionary or JSON data. And from here, what we can do is we can load that prompt, and now we have it simply here as a Python string. So we can print this and see here we have the rendered prompt. All right, but so far not much different from, for example, using LangChain or even using f-strings for that matter. But now let's have a quick look at the file that is in here at the actual Jinja templating language and see what's going on over here. So one of the interesting things that we can do is we can, for example, here at the front matter, which we can use as metadata in here. And then we get into the prompt itself. But with Jinja, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, there is more utility to this. We have much more granular control over how we can really alter and work with this template, because Jinja is really a templating engine, a library specifically for that. So we can see that we can put in variables, for example, but we can also put in default values in here, which is something that could be interesting in some cases. But, and here is where it gets really interesting, we can also use conditional logic in here. And next to this, next to these if statements, we can also use loops and macros and filters. But let me show you what this does over here. So here we have conditional logic with an if statement, meaning if the pipeline variable is set to help desk, we render this. So additional context for internal help desk. Let me show you over here. And if not, if else, this is going to be the additional context for customer support. So this is a very simple binary decision over here to illustrate this. But what this now does is if we come back to the prompts and if we run this and we call the support prompt, so you can see pipeline, we have support, pipeline is help desk. Here we get the additional context for customer support, and here, same file, same prompt, different input variable, we can get additional context for the internal help desk. So we can apply conditional logic for more granular control over our prompts while also validating the input, which is something I did not show, but here you can see if, for example, ticket is not undefined, you get an error rendering a template ticket is undefined. So you have more input control over that, which you can probably also do with other approaches, but everything together, so having the separate files within your project with the G2, so these are prompts, having a separate location, having input, validation, and control, and then also being able to apply this conditional logic while also not being tied to a specific ecosystem or framework, like for example LangChain or Llama Index, or even with, for example, LangFuse with the whole CMS system, for us gives us the flexibility and control that we need to work on a variety of projects and serve a whole bunch of different clients while maintaining a systematic approach. And this conditional logic, I haven't seen it anywhere yet, people talking about this, but to me, this is really a big thing and something that is really important to optimize your applications over time. Really how I see these conditional logic and prompts, they enable the nuanced, context-aware instructions and responses mirroring natural conversation adaptability, and also can reduce token usage and eliminating the need for similar prompts. So imagine this, when you have a conversation with someone, based on what that person is saying, you are going to slightly alter maybe your tone, or you give some more examples, or you adjust accordingly, right? Whereas with prompts, typically what you see, you have these long prompts and you have some if for example, the user is not a customer, then do this. And if it is a customer, then you should, talk about these kind of like things. And within one prompt. And then one level further would already be, okay, you create separate prompts and then route, let's say route the user to the specific prompt. But then you create a lot of redundancy, right? So you might have one prompt file, which is like 90% the same, a duplicate one. And then that 10% has that like different context specific about, okay, it is for customer support. Oh, then you need to be aware of this. With this conditional logic, you can easily take care of that. So in my opinion, this is a really cool strategy, and this is over time going to improve the way and change really the way we work with prompts. So that is our approach right now. We use the prompt manager class. We use Jinja templates with metadata and conditional logic. We use a predefined folder structure where we place everything, and within the application itself, we just import, or we get the prompt with the prompt manager. We fill in the variables there. We have input validation, and that's how we put these prompts really into the AI system itself. Now, then let's finally cover some best practices. So we've covered a lot here about how to manage prompts, different ways, different strategies. This is a final slide to give you basically everything that we know and that we do right now when it comes to best practices when building these large language models applications. So really the one sentence summary of this presentation: effective prompt management combines structured organization, flexible templating, and systematic evaluation to create adaptable, efficient, and powerful LLM applications that evolve with your project needs. Here are 9 tips. If you are working with LLMs, if you're working with prompts, really do it. Take 1 day to study prompt engineering. It's not that hard, but really one dedicated day, couple of hours, dive deeper into it. It will get you a long way. Just look up all the best practices, do some, look into some research, some meta-analysis, then centralize your prompts within your project structure. Doesn't matter which level you are at right now. I recommend centralizing, creating some kind of centralized structure for this, so you can easily see where your prompts are coming from. Then consider using Jinja as a templating engine for flexibility and versatility. If you've seen this presentation, you think, oh, this is cool, consider it. Maybe you're already fine with using the prompt templates. If it works for you, totally fine, but it has helped us. Experiment with role-based, emotion, few shot, and chain of thought prompting. If you don't know what it is, take 1 day to study prompt engineering. Structure your outputs in Markdown format. You want to know why? Take 1 day to study prompt engineering. Leverage structured outputs for routing and logic. So I'm a big fan of the instructor library. OpenAI also recently introduced structured outputs in the API. Use structured output to create intermediate steps and metadata that you can use for routing and conditional logic. Also at the prompt level. So not only for the flow of the application, but also for your prompts. So that's also tip number 7, implement conditional logic for adaptive prompts. Implement version control and rollbacks. So as your application gets more serious, knowing that you store your prompts within version control, also figure out how to get them back. So make sure you have a system in place where, okay, it's buried in the commit messages, but can you get it back? How much hassle is that? And at least make sure that you know how to do it. If you just rely on version control, you might need a more like a smarter approach with like specific like rollbacks. Okay, this is our prompt, product description, version 1. We recently went to version 2, but it turns out it doesn't work actually. How can you easily revert back to version 1? And then also something we didn't cover in here because it's actually already beyond prompt management, but create evaluation datasets to monitor the performance. So create some, and this is also something you can do yourself, or you could also use frameworks like Langsmith, Langfuse for this. Make sure that whenever you work on changes and you push them, let's say, to production, that you know that you're not only optimizing locally, but evaluate globally as well. So that's then the summary of really how you systematically improve LLM applications from a prompt perspective over time. You start with defining your methodology based on everything that we covered. Pick the one that best suits your needs. Even if that's inline prompts, if it works for you, if that floats your boat, totally fine, but pick your methodology and stick to it. Then optimize locally. So refine your prompts on isolated cases or problems. So you might have a user ticket coming in, a user question, whatever, and you want to optimize locally. That's what I mean there, on an isolated case. So tune the prompt, see how the output is changing, validate that. So here you can, on the local isolated case, you can just follow your intuition, but you can also leverage tools like DSPy for more efficient optimization. But then not only optimize locally, but also evaluate globally, meaning that the changes that you test on a local isolated variable, make sure that when you push those, that you also have that evaluation data set and see how it can affect the entire system. So you really should be aware of unexpected effects in other areas. If you tweak something here, it might go down over here. And this is also why you want to continuously update your data set to prevent model drift. This is something that is common practice within the machine learning world, but for LLMs and prompts, it's the same. So make sure to do that as well. So that's an overall summary, some tips, and then define methodology, optimize locally, and evaluate globally. All right, and then that's it for this one. And now, by the way, if you're a data professional, AI engineer, someone who's working with data or applications like this, prompts that we just covered, and you consider freelancing to maybe capitalize on the current AI hype that is going on, but you don't really know where to get started, you might want to check out the first link in the description. It's a video of me going over how my company, datalumina, can help you with that. Now, in all transparency, it's a landing page, it's a funnel designed to get leads for my company, but if you consider freelancing, you might want to check it out. And then, as always, thank you for watching. Consider liking the video if you found it helpful, and subscribe if you want to learn more about building data and AI applications. And then if you're interested in learning more about how we, for example, use Langfuse, the open source version, so self-hosted, then you should check out this video next. This is the evaluation framework and tool that we are using to, next to managing the actual prompts, also manage performance over time. And you can set it up completely for free, self-hosted. This video will show you how to do so.